Hey, everyone, if I can have your attention, please. So I think that we are ready to start the next discussion panel of our conference. So I would like to invite you to listen to this discussion panel on innovations in local communities. And I would like to introduce Eileen McDougall, who is investment manager in Oxford Investment Opportunity Network, and who will be moderating this discussion, and who will introduce her panelists. So, welcome.
Thanks, Bob. I've got a bit of imposter syndrome with such exalted company here, but what's life if you don't have a few challenges? Anyway, the innovation and local communities, this panel is here to see what positive impact can universities and innovation organisations have on their neighbourhoods and local communities. Now, the four panellists here have very active roles within that. I would like to go down the panel. I will introduce each one of them with a slight bit of background, but then if you could just say what you're doing now and what the impacts are. So Unai, if I start with you, what I found interesting from my perspective was that you're a founder of Social company.
Thank you.
New in Britain, which was a social enterprise, and new in Oxford, which supports communities, and you've supported over 5,000 individuals over about 5 years. So over to you, Uni.
Thank you very much. So yeah, that's what I have done in the past. And now as well, what I'm doing too, I'm also working for Oxford Brookes University. Within my role, I'm one of the business startup advisors. So I'm hands-on helping people at Brookes. And I'm part of the directory of innovation, research and entrepreneurship. Within that, I'm part of the entrepreneurship area. And in the entrepreneurship area, what we do, we're helping students to open startups, as well as we have the entrepreneurship center, where we're helping local startups from Oxford and surrounding in order to have a life science space. And as well as this, now we are working with spin-outs. So we are now integrating all the parameters within entrepreneurship. Within my role, one of the things that I do, in order to create innovations, I need to also ensure that my students have the knowledge, but also know the local ecosystem. So with the knowledge, we basically help people to ideate, we make them inspired, we help them incubate the idea, and we help them to initiate that. We do that with different programs, very similar to what they do at Oxford or at other universities. But one of the things that we do completely different to many other universities, it is that the people working within the team, we are not anymore organizers, we are not event creators, we are people who have got years of business support, so we can provide the right support to every student, and we can offer this customizable support to them. Good thing about it is nowadays, if you want to be an entrepreneur as well, you need to go through innovator visa, which means that most of the people that they come to a center, they're internationals and they want to open innovator business, and we help them with that. And within this as well, what's happened, we need to put them in touch with some of the local ecosystem. How do I do this? That's why, for example, I'm coming to some of these events like this one, where I can get to see what's available within the ecosystem. So, for example, within the local government, there is fantastic supports available from, I don't know if you guys heard of the Business and Intellectual Property Center, just in the library, and it's such a catalyst where you can be involved within the University of Oxford, Brookes, the community, and you can do fantastic projects there. Databases, research, networking, such a really good place. As well as this, for example, how we are working within the local ecosystem and for example, the local economic partnerships, where we can put our students in touch with the local government and help them to get places for them to have an office and so on. As well as this for example, we managed to get one of our students to speak to the council, which helped him in order to get a recommendation letter, and then he used to build a grant application. And we're doing this in a very way that we can foster and we can help our students to be exposed to the ecosystem and to help them to thrive and survive. Some of the things as well that we have done within Oxford, we have been quite involved with Oxford University Innovation. We have been going quite a lot to some of the incubator panels. So then we get to see what they have available there. One of the students actually from Brookes, or one of the startups from Brookes, was able to design a haptic tool and was able to partner with somebody at Oxford and then apply through the OUI Accelerator program. And now they're having investment from Japan in order to make that happen. As well as this, we have been able to attend to events like the demo day from Inspire, where we were not just presenting about Enterprise Center and telling people about what we do, but also we were able to get our students to expose them to the local ecosystem in Oxford, to investors and so on, in order to increase the amount of startups and in order to increase the amount of people that we have at Brooks opening businesses and innovation. And as well as this, what we do then, it is we just basically get to see what's available within the ecosystem, so then we can direct people to the right sources of support. Because we all know that within every ecosystem, you have got good and you have got bad. So our job is not also just to look at it's good to look at both of the things, so then we can refer our students to the right places and for them to innovate. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Very succinct. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going down the panel, but I would like to go through. I've got a listing here, and I've got Jessica on my list. That is perfect. What I found really interesting from yours, as I said, we don't come here and, we do have backgrounds. And you worked, I think, for over 8 years at the Social Development Direct, which provides innovation, social development and research services. And really, you work internationally, I think, from that perspective, and you built inclusive societies. And I think that's partly what this is all about today. And I think you've got that they have a track record of over 30 countries, including fragile states and post-conflicting settings. So very, very relevant, I think, to today's overarching one. But that's by the by. Where are you today and what do you do with the local communities?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm Jessica. I work at the School Center for Social Entrepreneurship, which is a small research center and student experience center at Saïd Business School, which is part of the University of Oxford. And we're in this funny position where we have one foot in the university and one foot out in the real world. And I think the most important thing to say about our work and everything we do is we really see ourselves as a bridge and a translator, trying to bring those two worlds together. And, that plays out in our research where, often working with partners within the private sector, whether it's a social enterprise or traditional business, whether that's government partners or local partners of different kinds. So trying to learn from them, bring their insights into our teaching and into our other work, and vice versa, bring expertise from the ivory tower back into communities, whether locally in Oxford or globally. And I think this, I felt a bit of imposter syndrome in this panel, because I thought we actually don't do that much locally here in Oxford, and it's a bit uncomfortable. We have a few examples that I'll talk about, but I think it's something I personally would like to do more of. And I think working in, in this big esteemed university, we really feel the town and gown divide that a few people mentioned earlier, which can be uncomfortable, I think, especially working in such a rich, diverse city, full of social innovators, full of social entrepreneurs, full of expertise that is excluded from many of these conversations. Really we don't learn from often enough. So in this bridging role and sort of with our convening power, we're trying to do more and more of that. So I think in the discussion, maybe I can talk about a couple of examples, which I'll just tee up now. One of them someone did a couple of years ago. It's called Oxified, which is a very long acronym. But it was basically about catalyzing equity, diversity, and inclusion in the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Oxford. So we brought together academics mostly from Saïd, but also from the other departments, some of our alumni who are working in these roles in business, in conversation with local social innovators who were doing this CDI work in really interesting ways. We captured some case studies of local social businesses you'll all be really familiar with, and their diverse approaches to building equity in their teams and their supply chains, for their customers and their beneficiaries, and to sort of harness all of that diverse lived, learned, and practice expertise in the room, and created a living toolkit that's online. You just Google Oxford Toolkit, you'll find it. That it's like a starter for 10 and start thinking about these ideas. And what is so beautiful, I think, about it is, the examples in it all come from the local ecosystem here, right? So it's really relevant for Oxford. The cases are from Oxford, the challenges are from Oxford. That's one example. And another example that I'm proud of is some ongoing work that we're doing on impact measurement. I think especially working in somewhere like the academic questions around this are, really theoretical and tricky, and I think a lot of the kind of practical guidance doesn't often fit our local context. And so we learned a bit about an approach at the old fire station, which the local social enterprise community probably know, and the way they think about understanding and measuring the impact they have in Oxford, various communities. It's all about meaningful measurement. And they've done a huge amount of work to understand their own impact and to also influence their donors and the broader ecosystem here to think about things of measurement differently. A lot of that is around storytelling, a lot of that is around shifting power dynamics between funder and funded. And so we're at the moment finishing data collection for a case study on that approach, and we'll be creating a toolkit later in the year. So happy to talk more about those and some of our other work. But just one final thing, I'm really happy you mentioned my previous experience because it feels like a long time ago. It's I think relevant to the school's work as well, where we have this kind of local and global footprint, and there's a tension between them and managing where I think about our partners, I think about our students, school scholars, funders, everyone we work with. It's pretty global. We have partners all over the world, and yet we're really deeply integrated. We've been in Oxford for over 20 years now. And so I think it's about kind of managing those two levels that we struggle with sometimes, particularly when it comes to kind of power and what expertise is seen as the most valuable. Comparing a social venture that maybe has all the accolades, it is a school awardee, a Schwab awardee, and Schilker fellow, compared to the local social venture, which maybe doesn't have those accolades, but has just as much experience to bear. So that's the last thing I'll say. But yeah.
No, thanks very much. And global places are made up of local communities, so nothing's done in isolation, is it? Ashley, you're last, but I'll come to you next. And again, we all come from, have a history, some of us a longer history than others. But what I found interesting, that you started as a trainee journalist at an English language newspaper in Costa Rica. And
not expect to be reminded of
yeah, but you did radio production assistant at the BBC on, farming today, costing the earth. These are all relevant to social impacts. But what I really love is that equal rights for all fruit and veg. And you started a social enterprise around wonky fruit. You can laugh, you can say, but actually, it's really important for today's and going forward, isn't it? So, yes, you are Chief Operating Officer for SDG's Impact Lab, but you do come from, so what are you doing now? What is your focus?
I must admit, I wasn't expecting to talk about any of those things, delving deep into the past. And actually, one previous experience that you didn't mention there, but I actually think is particularly relevant to the conversation today. So I joined the lab only about a year ago, so I'm still fairly new. And that's my first role in an academic institution. My background before that has very much been social enterprise, community-based, entrepreneurial, the whole kind of startup impact sector. And for the 4 years before I joined the university, I was working with the Oxfordshire Social Enterprise Partnership and also the local enterprise partnership here in Oxfordshire, to deliver a 4-year enterprise support programme, working with social enterprises, charities and impact businesses across Oxfordshire. And I was one of those impact businesses. I say was, because actually I sold my business, Wonky Foods, just a couple of months ago, actually. Thank you. And so when this role came up with the SDG Impact Lab, for me, it was very exciting because I, was constantly frustrated on the other side of seeing that disconnect, that lack of cooperation and collaboration between the university and the outside community. I'd often find myself at networking events where I would be introducing people who'd worked within the university who didn't know each other, but I knew them externally to the university. So I am sort of trying to make it a bit of my mission with the SDG Lab to join up some of those dots. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we do at the SDG Impact Lab and then bring it back to a couple of new programmes that we've just launched this year, which I think are particularly relevant to the conversations today. So Impact Lab was set up 3 years ago by Dr. Ed Brooks and Professor Alex Betts here at the university. We recognise that gap. We've talked about bridging that gap, and this is a phrase that keeps coming up between academia and industry. Industry was originally the focus of the lab. Trying to bring some of that incredible research expertise and talent within the university walls and translate that into the real world outside the university walls. And how do we do that? We do that through a fellowship programme where we bring together multidisciplinary teams of postgrads with non-academic partners to work on impact research projects that aim to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I hope everybody in the room is familiar with. So fellowship programs are nothing new, joining bright students with external partners, but I think there's a couple of key USPs that we have at the lab. One is that multidisciplinary approach. So we don't have students working in isolation on research projects. We have engineers working in teams alongside social anthropologists, alongside MBA students. And that's something that really resonates with partners that we work with, just bringing together that combination of fresh perspectives. They find really impressive. And the second USP, I guess, is the lens, the framework of using the SDGs specifically on all of the research projects that we do. So partners we've worked with over the last 3 years range from BMW to EasyJet holidays to UN tourism. We're working with the UN to help develop their first ESG framework for sustainable businesses. But what's changed this year, and this kind of carries on from the point that you made, Jessica, is that we recognise that actually it's brilliant working with the likes of BMW and the UN and EasyJet, but there are so many fantastic local organisations doing brilliant work on our doorstep, and the university, we realised, could be doing much more to support and interact with them. Professor Alex Betts, some of you may also know, was recently appointed as the university's local and global engagement officer. So he works with the VC's senior team to help the VC deliver her vision of the university working more closely with the local community. So we're very much kind of embedded in that vision and mission. And to that end, this year we've launched 2 new programmes, our Community Impact Lab and also our Local Policy Impact Lab. Lots of labs going on. I'm moving back at the moment. We also have a sport lab and other things going on, but that's another conversation. So the Community Impact Lab, which is one I can speak more about. I'm less directly involved with the Local Policy Lab, but that's still a really exciting initiative, and you can Google them and find them on our SDG Lab website. But the Community Impact Lab essentially takes, we have a cohort of 12 postgrads who are working with 5 local partners on projects ranging from mapping all of the social prescribing activities that are happening across the county and trying to bring them together in one kind of easy to access space. We're also working with an organisation called Active Oxfordshire to look at how we can help adults with learning disabilities get better access to provision and resources and support around physical activity and well-being. So a real variety of projects there. And actually just tomorrow, we're going to, the students have been working on those projects for the last 8 weeks, and we have our final presentation and showcase where we're going to be bringing together all of the partners tomorrow night at Tap Social Movement, which again, another fantastic social enterprise in the city. Local Policy Lab is another new initiative, and we have 19 graduate students, again, using that multidisciplinary team concept, so working together in teams on 9 different projects, all focused on health and climate policy. And the idea is that they are working closely with the local council and also other local organisations to really do a deep dive into data analysis, impact measurement, to try and better inform some of the local policy that happens here in the county. So it's very much, I'm really excited about that potential to use research talent within the university to drive proper change. to really help identify the problems that are out there, rather than developing amazing tech, amazing ideas, doing research for the sake of doing research without asking the so what question, the why, what can we do with that research? What can we do with that intelligence and that knowledge to really be able to make some significant societal and environmental changes? Yeah, I think that's probably it. So what I think about
And last but not least, Pippa. And Oxford University, we work quite closely under my role, but the areas that I really found interesting, which is very close to my heart, is the money, as I say, investment, etc. But what I found really interesting that they've set up, and I hope you give more detail, the reward-based crowdfunding platform, Ox Reach.
Yes.
But outside of that, I found interesting was that the Impact U, which extends that out to about 15 universities, and I'll try and bring that out further later on. You don't work in isolation, but I'll leave it there. And Pippa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm Pippa Christopherou. I'm the social venture lead at Oxford University Innovation. So OUI for short. It's Oxford University Innovation is quite a mouthful. So OUI is the commercialization arm for the University of Oxford. So we've existed around 35 years or so in various forms within the university, and now we're a subsidiary entity, but wholly owned by the university. And we exist to support members of the university to do commercial endeavours. So whether that's licensing of ideas, like with the AstraZeneca vaccine, a very commonly known example, whether that's starting new businesses. So we have an incubator, our startup incubator that Unai mentioned. It supports students and alumni of the University of Oxford who want to start up a business. So we have a programme around that. And we also support members of the university who are researchers or staff who have ideas linked to their work at the university and they want to start spin-out companies. And then we also have a consulting arm who support members of the university do consulting with external companies. And that takes very many different forms, whether it's with large corporates or with very small companies and spin-out companies as well. And so what I focus on are social ventures. So those are mission-driven businesses that we help to create, both through our incubator, student stuff, and through our research-related spin-outs. And we've been doing that for about 5 years. It actually came out of the crowdfunding platform that we started. So my colleague Sarah Deakin and I were running alongside the development office in the university a crowdfunding platform for social good projects. And that came about because Sarah had a project that had real social good potential, but the research funders weren't going to fund any more of the work that they needed to actually translate the research in the university to the actual social good impact outside of the university. And so there was this funding gap, and we basically built a crowdfunding, rewards-based crowdfunding platform, which we ran for about 4 years with the development office. Unfortunately, it's no longer going, but it gave us a lot of lessons about ways in which different people in the university require different types of support and different types of business models to actually facilitate the impact they want to create. So one of the projects we supported through OxReach was a homelessness app. So students two students from the university had noticed the homelessness crisis that Oxford has, and they thought that a lot of people weren't carrying cash anymore. So their solution was, let's make a platform where we can have people from the public donate to it, and then the people who are homeless and who are working with a support worker can be put on the app, and you can donate to their personal journey to come out of homelessness. And so now they're a startup company out of our incubator. They're our second social venture we ever did. And they're working across the south of England, and they've just got a big grant to try and expand further north as well. So they're really addressing
local problems that they viewed as students, that we've now helped them create a business and help them get funding to kind of grow. So that's one example of how we kind of support in a very organic way projects that are coming from university in lots of different shapes and sizes. And so we have 19 different social ventures in our portfolio at the moment that range from everything in mental health, poverty, homelessness, carbon credits, nature-based insetting, so putting biodiversity back into where people get their raw materials and supply chains. It's quite diverse. And the thing that I've also experienced, like Jessica, is that because we exist purely to support the university members, our remit's not really being focused on the local community very much historically. But the knowledge exchange strategy for the university that was published a few years ago actually has in it some directions and some aims to work more with the local community. So one of the things that I've been doing with OSEP, who are a local social enterprise support system, who they existed and were funded through Oxlab, and OSEP are amazing and support a lot of local social enterprises. And so we run networking sessions to try and break down the barriers between social entrepreneurs and the university and the local community, because I believe that they're all having the same challenges. So it's really useful to get these people together to discuss their challenges and try to build a more coherent network across the local community and the university community. So that's one of the things that we're doing more locally. And then obviously OUI has created, we've got so many different startups and spin-outs. We've done over 300 to date. So a lot of those companies are based in Oxford. So another question that we often get is, how are they contributing to the local ecosystem? And there's economic benefit of them being set up and employing people locally and putting money back into the local ecosystem. But with the rise of ESG and there's a new initiative called the Oxford Inclusive Economic Partnership, which is around trying to encourage local businesses to do more to support the local ecosystem. So OUI have signed up to the OIEP charter, and we've put a few small pledges to get started, but it's about thinking about how we can do better to get more involved with the local community ourselves. I could talk forever about those types of things, but
No, thanks very much. I know we've got questions at the end, but I think from the perspective here, these background, have any questions for the panel now before I go on to kind of dive deeper into, what's the changing role within academia? Yes, there is.
Hi, I was wondering about like this bridge between like finishing like this academic degree, like let's say a PhD, and actually working outside of academia. How do you guys see it? How many examples have you seen it? And what kind of like how can we source these opportunities? Because I'm from social science, specifically political science, and then we discuss like increasingly more how like a lot of people doing PhDs do not want to stay in academia. But what's the value of having a PhD in social science for you guys in terms of employability, as opposed to just having a master's degree? And then how do you see these like two spheres like interacting in terms of like employability?
Who would like, Ashley, I was going to say.
Happy to answer that. And so at the SDG Lab, obviously helping those external partners to advance the SDGs is one core mission, but actually we've realised, even though it may not have been the original intention, that another key part of what we do is giving PhD students who may have otherwise stayed in academia, giving them that first, toe in the water in corporate world, working with different types of partners, and actually being able to open up their minds to how they can apply their research on the ground to be able to affect change in society. Now, not all of them dip their toe in that water and decide they want to dive in. It's like, actually, academia is the right route for me. But part of what we're doing is being able to expose postgrads to these different ways of working and to equip them with those skills of being able. So we have 12 postgrads at the moment who today are on site at the BMW Cowley plant. And they are there full time for the next 4 weeks, interacting with the senior team, talking to employees on the shop floor, really, getting crucial insight into working world, and also how to manage those relationships with the BMW is a client, and they're having to learn those skills of, what is the client's brief, what are they trying to achieve through that research project, and I think it's hugely valuable being able to provide PhD students with that exposure to different routes that they can take once they finish their degree.
I would say yes, with the school, what would you say in reply to that?
Yeah, I think just a couple of thoughts. I think, a few of us talked about us and our organizations and searches. I think increasingly it's so valuable if you have the skills, as someone on the job market who can do that. I think having more people in academia who want to have careers, they're also using their research expertise to advise organizations is really valuable. It's unfortunate that academic incentive structure in terms of career progression and tenure doesn't really align with that. There's a mismatch, but I still think it's valuable. And I think, if you're in an academic job at Oxford, I think you get 30 days per year to do consulting, which is a great perk and something everyone should do, I think. I would also just say, this isn't for PhD students, but for people doing postdocs or lectureships, we have a program called the Early Career Research Fellowship that's trying to find, those rare cases of people who do want to have those hybrid careers and aren't getting the kind of advice and support that they need from departments to figure out how to do that. Their supervisors probably saying, just publish, that's the most important thing. And they're like, yes, and I also want to, use this for some other good. So we have a cohort every year, 4 or 5 researchers from all over the university, social sciences, but also, really across all divisions. And it's incredible. We've built up this community over 5 years now. And they're all having such interesting hybrid careers, and most of them have done both worlds. So it is possible. It's just a shame that, the university haven't figured out how to support this kind of work.
Una, can I ask you as well, because you work actively with students, etc. So
because one thing I was going to say there, it is that, for example, if you're a student and you have a great idea that you want to put into place, if you're thinking to go into the entrepreneurship path as well, it's also about thinking in how can you validate your research and make sure that it has market viability. Because in reality, what happens many times, it is many entrepreneurs when they come to a center, they always think about what product do I want to do? What solution do I want to do? And then when you ask them, why do you want to do it? Oh, because I think it's cool, because I think it's great, or because I think it's needed. But it's not just only about that. It's also about understanding what does the customer want, or is actually anybody willing to pay for that? And how can you validate that idea? So then you can elevate it to the next level, apply for grants, apply for support, bootstrap, and then you can perhaps go to VCs and so on in order to make a viable company from your research, or even create a spin-out from the university as well.
mind you, I think for starting up leadership, if you're leading a business or if you're leading within the institution, the skills are still the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with that. And I think my own personal opinion is that my PhD, which I did in bio-nanotechnology, clearly has no social enterprise or venture angle at all, is still a very useful thing because it taught me lots of skills that I still use today, even though I don't do any wet lab stuff. And so I think actually the perspective that you gain and the skills that you gain from doing a social sciences PhD are super valuable. And they are really relevant to, if you want to go into business or entrepreneurship, they are really relevant to that. You know, how can you talk to stakeholders and people and manage those relationships? Those types of things are key to any person running a business. And as a social scientist, you will understand how all that works together. So that's super valuable. And And we have a program called the STEP program, which runs in July for students who might want to do startup companies. And some of them join that program without having an idea, but they then come together with other people who do have an idea to build a business. So there's lots of different ways in which you can get involved in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. Inspire in university is a great kind of bringing together of all of the things that we do in Oxford to try and give you an opportunity to work through that pathway. But we've also had PhD students who've, created an invention, who started a company with a professor. The professor stayed in their job and the PhD students ended up being the CEO. And they're very successful companies. So one example is Ultronics, which is like a heart disease AI company. Well, okay, that's science-based. There's no reason why you couldn't do that from a social sciences perspective.
There was a question there.
Hi, my name is Alexandra, and I actually study also nanotechnology. And I wanted to refer a little bit to the answer or a question about the market validation for student enterprises. And for some like social, let's say, startups, then they're based on things that we can everyone can experience them, we can see them, everyone, is to some extent aware about the problem. But what I noticed in my field is that sometimes it's very hard to find the justification because the companies are protecting their processes. Like, for example, the ideas of making some chemical processes more efficient, It's sometimes very hard to justify them economically because of many secrets in the field. And I would need to go to the manufacturing plants of some pharmaceutical companies in order to actually find the specifics of the reactions. And I was wondering how these universities, big as Oxford or in my case in Cambridge, how they could potentially help us, like master's students, PhDs, to go to these companies, actually experience what they do and kind of help them, but from the academic perspective,
Can I just hold that thought there, because I think we're coming back now to the changing role. What can we do in the future? And I think we're coming to a point now where COVID provided an impetus, but governance has provided an opportunity for early stage companies, for social impact, because large organizations, its legislation has to do reporting on ESG. And for now, it's all been mostly around the social carbon capture, but that's now being broadened out. So there is an opportunity for big corporates to engage more with early stage businesses, which I think could influence back round to universities, because the impact is, from the university's perspective, they have to make money. They're there to make from their IP, and it could be licensing or it could be startups. So can I ask Jess, yourself, where do you feel under the opportunity with working with corporates, how that might be able to influence somebody like the lady here, who wants to maybe work within that and provide that background to that corporate, because it is going to be building up to them. Legislation is a great driver for change.
Is that for me?
It's for you.
So I think, part of what, when we talk about market validation, we do a lot of reaching out to companies and saying, is this high level idea useful for you, or would you be interested in it? And that's a really good way to kind of de-risk that. The driver from the big corporate perspective is that with ESG legislation coming in and them being required to report on a lot of things, like, for example, Oxford Nanopore is one of our largest spin-out companies in Oxford, and they have a huge sustainability report that they now publish because they're big enough that they fall under the requirements to do that. But it's pushing them to go beyond just reporting some of the things that they do. So a lot of our larger spin-out companies are starting to think more about how they hire more diverse teams, for example, how they engage more with the local community, what they give back to that, and also how they work with universities. And we have more and more corporates coming to OUI asking for ideas, asking for access to expertise through consultants, to try and help them understand what that moving picture looks like. I think there's an opportunity from a procurement perspective for, as you said, for the larger corporates to work with the smaller entities. Things around the Social Value Act are requiring public organizations to think more about social value when they're procuring services as well as value for money. And so it gives some of the businesses that we've got in our portfolio who are delivering social change, who are giving back to communities or working with local communities or creating meaningful impact in whatever technological field they're doing. That gives them an advantage over businesses that aren't doing that, because these organizations are having to take that into account when they're procuring services.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts around, how this might be driving change within the startup community and with the social impact? Large corporates do have to prove that they actually are having an impact.
Just quick thought. I don't think it'll really answer the question, but maybe it's useful. Here in Oxford, there's a lot of small money around to connect students and academics with industry, like small grants, kind of secondment opportunities. So it's Google like knowledge exchange, funding, secondment, things come up all the time. And I always think they look amazing. And I don't know how we can use them, but that might be useful for you to get a foot in the door. And I think for them, it's also really good value, right? It's mutually beneficial because they also benefit from your fresh perspective and your expertise. The other thing I would just say is, I think I've been surprised in this role by how hungry businesses are for people who tell them what to do. And, for expertise of different kinds, right? And I think that can look really different. So yes, sometimes it's consultants who come in. It's not always that, but we ran a convening in January on just transition with food systems, and it was funded by a corporate partner. And they said to us after that, it was so rare to be in a room, and we didn't record it. It was Chatham House rules, but where people were just so open in terms of like the flow and exchange of these ideas. There were peers, from industry willing to speak pretty openly. It wasn't like a PR exercise, they're sharing failures as well. And academics, from PhD students all the way through senior faculty members, who are sharing across disciplines from across different departments of the university. It was just incredible. And, I think sometimes that kind of engagement can be more valuable than consulting. So I guess my point being that I think business is really hungry for this, and thinking about this panel, maybe we can bring more local innovation into that. I think there's probably a lot of exciting initiatives that, should be more part of this conversation than.
I think what you're saying there is it's around building trust between all those partners, etc. And I think that came back from the previous panel as well. And I think there was mentioned around, I think someone was saying he's just done online teaching, and the engagement's not there. It's around those in-person ones. But future-wise, AI and all of large language, and you're talking about data here, will that have an impact on how social enterprise is developed in the future?
But the point I want to make around that, all these, and I was having a really interesting conversation with somebody earlier this week about this, because funny enough, we're also thinking about doing an AI impact lab as well. We've got enough labs going on. Because there's all this exciting emerging tech, right? We can't keep up with the news stories and this being invented and that being invented. And I'm really worried that there's a gap there. Again, kind of the point I made earlier about technology for the sake of technology, research for the sake of research, it just becoming an intellectual pursuit and what's the most exciting, shiny thing that we can do. You need to connect all those people working with that emerging technology with the communities, those people working on the ground who can actually see the problems, the things that need to be fixed, but may not have the solutions, and join them up. So, before you get too carried away and seek all this investment for, you know, the next new bit of emerging tech, consult with the community. I'd love to see that, you know, convened and coordinated in a more productive way. What are the problems? Don't invent the tech and then try and figure out what the applications are. Figure out where the problems are and connect with the people who have the brains to create the brains in universities like Oxford and Cambridge to create the tech to help fix those problems.
Is that, and it comes back to what you were saying, Unai, about, you know, what is the, you know, market fit, etc. Yeah.
And if you want to just a quick remark, I can also say that it helps that since you, if you want also, if you have an idea and you're not allowed to speak about it because you have some secret, you can then make an application to patent it, and then you have a year time to make it as a business. There's also another option as well out there, just to let you know.
You have a question?
I want to just make a very minor remark about what you said is, you know, this innovation, in particular AI, and talking about local communities, is it's quite powerful. But there's also other side of the coin, impact on those communities. AI is a kind of a revolution, right? We experienced in the past multiple revolutions, and actually some of those communities maybe have been impacted. So also space for managing the expectation and managing the kind of a risk associated for those communities. And you cannot basically open those communities for those new technologies while not saying that, oh, you're gonna be replaced, right? And it's not only like a community, so I cannot. I mean, more in healthcare, the doctors care about being replaced, but actually this also touches the communities, right? And you know, the experience from past revolutions where entire sectors of the jobs being replaced by something that may impact those, right? So this is very important, I think, when we talk about with respect to the local communities, right? However, whatever the term we use for the community.
That's really interesting. We always use the word impact, and the assumption of impact means positive, but impact could be negative, right? Yeah, you're absolutely right. That needs to be part of the conversation much more.
We have another question here.
Hao Zha, and I'm just like part of town and part of Goud. My question is, because we talk about the trust, and it's easy maybe, you know, just build the trust with the big corporation and some companies, but how you build the trust with the community, where the research, especially in Oxford and the, you know, the range like Blackberries, Roskill, Barton, I'm very untrusted, you know, regarding the Oxford University, less maybe Brooks, but the Oxford University is like, it's no for us, and how we, it's like lots of projects, and that's why it's not visible, because it's not published, and even if it's published on Oxford University website, it's lost, because the Oxford University website is so huge. You find someone, and if you want to find something, it's like a big labyrinth. If you don't know how to communicate, it's very difficult to find anything. And that's why the people don't know what exactly Oxford University and maybe Brooks don't do it for the community, because it's not visible to local people. And I know the trust local people is very, very different than the businesses. And how is your approach to build the trust with the local people, not the businesses?
Do you want to take?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I've got experience on this. Yeah, so basically, for example, as we said before, we mentioned about the BAPC. The BAPC also was meant to be going into different local points as Blackberries. However, I think because of lack of funding and the lady going on maternity, wasn't being able to apply that service in Blackberries. However, it's happening in Oxford. And the way that this is done, it is by connecting the university with the local community and even Brooks as well. And for example, some of the things that have happened through there, it is about even a gentleman such as Tim Parhouse, who we managed to help him from there. He has a social enterprise in order to help children to sell coffee with him instead of doing something that they shouldn't be doing in the streets. So what he does then, he takes his children to go to festival, make coffees, and children can make up to £1,000 a day selling coffee. And what we have done with him is we help him how to do the social business that he's delivered. We help him to take him to big places such as the House of Lords. He was speaking at the BBC Banbury. And thanks to that also, he was also being invited at the University of Oxford, and he won the award last week about one of the best startups in the whole demo day from Inspire. So I think that by going to a local hubs, then they are not just from the university, but they're local communities, then you can do the legwork, you can be in touch. People can tell you different things and you can do that. I believe that within next year, there's going to be a local point at the DAPC Blackbird list. So then they will also have this opportunity. And once again, it's also about the language. People in different communities speak in different ways. It's completely different the way than, for example, you see me speaking when I'm in a conference such as this one, that if I'm speaking, for example, to people like from the community. And I mean, I'm not going to say the example happened to me in Blackbird list outside of the library, but
I'm in the Blackbird list. So.
yeah. But yeah, it's about how can you have a person that can speak the language from both of the communities and make something beautiful happen.
And I mentioned earlier that tomorrow we've got our first showcase of the 5 community impact projects that the students have been working on. And we talked about that. We could have invited those 5 community organisations here to Oxford. We could have hired out a swanky lecture theatre and done some wonderful kind of PowerPoint presentations, but we're not. We're going to Tap Social Movement, who many people might know is a fantastic venue in Botley, working with prison leavers. To reintegrate them back into society. So we're going to do it there, and actually members of the public, if they're there, they can sit and listen to the presentations as well. And I think we've been a bit protective because this is a pilot this year, but actually just listening to you, I'm thinking, well, actually next year when we have, this time next year when we have our a bigger programme, more projects, more research to talk about, why don't we just make it a public event, and invite members of the public to come along, especially where those organisations are working in their communities, so they can hear directly from Oxford University postgrads about the work that they've been doing. And I think that is a way that we're able to integrate the university more in local dialogue.
I can see that we're kind of getting close to our finishing one. So really kind of what is, do I take a question or do we finish up? Go on, let's take the question.
It's like a summary question, because you've provided a lot of examples and inspirations from specific interventions that you have made. But if we are to sum these things up, what do you think is the irreplaceable role of academic leaders in facilitating changes like these, so that in which other leaders may struggle to perform? In other words, what can academic leaders do in the area of local intervention that other leaders may find difficult to manage? What specific what's the specific thing that academic leaders bring to the table?
I mean, from my perspective, I think a lot of the ideas that come to OEY for inventions or potential new business ideas are often driven by needs. And I think academics and researchers often work with an idea of, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and this is the way that I can build a solution to solve that problem. And I think the freedom to be able to come up with the solution that best fits the need is one of the valuable things about being in a university institution, in that you have the time and space to do the research, to identify the things that work best, to test them, to do some rigorous academic work, to validate it, to say, this is the solution that really fixes this need. We thought it might be over here, but actually it's this thing over here instead. And so I think that's one of the really crucial things, of when people come to us and say, I want to start a business, here's my solution, because you've already spent a lot of time being able to think about that. And often if you're, I don't know, working in a corporate setting, you have a structure in place, you have to follow certain directions, and that might not take you down the path where you end up if you did do it through academia. So I think that's a strength.
Jessica, could I ask you, you said here you're not working local, you work global with the school, and you look at the data, and what's your take on the differentiation of what academic leaders can do from corporate?
We do work global.
Yes.
It's both. I think, if I'm really honest, like, I think academic leaders are necessary, but they're totally insufficient, right? So they're like one of many actors who need to work together on these issues, right? And I think I wouldn't say they're more important than leaders at all. It's just, a complementary skill that everything you said that I agree with. It's also about like a long-term, a lot of academics will work on the same issue their whole career, similar issues, right? And you have often the freedom of time to think about this, over a long span. You don't have, the quarterly report necessarily. So I think that complements really well, leaders coming out of industry. I didn't get a chance to respond to your question. I just wanted to add that, I think we also need to look at the root causes of the distrust and the disjuncture between, timing down and like, of course there's distrust. Imagine living in this city and not having access to the majority of the space because behind the walls of colleges and not having the block card that gets you in everywhere. And there's such power of asymmetry. And I think, we could probably all recognize that and try to understand the source of that. And that's a really good first step to then overcome it. And I think it's really hard to grapple with those issues.
And dead on 12 o'clock. I think that was a final at the very end. So thanks very much, panel. Really.